Hello, good morning. Welcome to nfpSynergy's YouTube channel. I'm Ray. I'm Senior Researcher at nfpSynergy, and I hope you're kept well and safe at this very difficult time. We did the webinar just now, an hour ago, but because of the technical difficulty, I was unable to deliver the presentation. So I am hoping to share this recording on YouTube so that you can watch at any time at your convenience. So first of all, we set up this channel in the hope of keeping in touch with clients and also to share insights with the charity sector and helping charities survive this crisis. And if you haven't seen already, we have run the first seminar on a series of short posts we've been running into looking into attitudes to coronavirus and charities. But today, I wanted to talk about Charity Brand Evaluator. That's our research of charity brand. Brand is so important for charities, and actually brand should be at the center of your day-to-day work, working in a charity. Say you're launching a new fundraising campaign or an awareness campaign, you want your brand to be at the forefront of the visuals you're delivering. Or perhaps you're drafting a press release or impact statement, and your language and the tone of your voice really should reflect your brand values and the mission statement of the organization. So successful brand can take you far and wide. A good example of a successful brand would be someone like Macmillan. They're effective at speaking to different audiences, not just donors and beneficiaries, but also volunteers, media and journalists, and the public and the government. So that's why it's very, very important for charities to measure their brand through research. So moving on, but how do we measure a charity brand? Charity brands are very different from corporate brands, and as a charity, you don't want to be, cheap or rich or not necessarily luxurious brand. How can we really measure charity brands effectively? So when we were developing this methodology for CBE, Charity Brand Evaluator, we did a very extensive academic literature review on the subject. We also looked at what corporate brands do and how they measure brands, and combined it with our own knowledge and expertise of working with charities for 15 years. So explaining our methodology, so we have charity brand, start with finding out what people think of you, how you as a charity brand are perceived by prompting a set of attributes. So there are about 20 attributes we ask. Would you describe this charity by selecting up to 7 of these attributes? And this is just a selection, but are you caring? Are you professional? Are you friendly? I don't think any charity would aspire to be uncaring. I think this seems to be the primary attribute you would have as a charity, and most charities get caring. But say like if you're a health and medical charity delivering specific services, or your animal charity offering veterinary service, it's important for you to be considered professional. Or say you're working with young children, like Scouts or Girl Guiding, offer fun activities, and you want to be friendly, you want to be seen as friendly. Inspiring and determined are a set of attributes important for any campaigning charity. You want to make it happen, you want to be seen as an activist. And heroic is also an interesting attribute. We often see charities in armed forces and veterans sector getting this attribute because of the people they help. So that's one hand and component of CBE, Charity Brand Evaluator. And the other important component of CBE is what we call metrics or values. So are you seen as relevant? Are you differentiating yourself enough, standing out from other brands similar to you? Are you visible? Do people talk about you and hear about you? Momentum, are you having a momentum heading into the right direction, seen as a dynamic or energetic organization? We've been running CBE for a couple of years, and it was really interesting to see this momentum metric. Some environmental organizations were increasing their momentum score, and I think if you see, like, you look at the past 18 months, like all the talk about climate change, and this really affects how charities are perceived. And authority is also important. You don't necessarily want to be seen as an authoritarian, but if you want to be the voice of the sector, if you want to represent the voices of the people affected by, say, certain health condition, it is an important metric for you. And finally, we also measure emotions. You want to activate people, either happy or sad, negatively or positively. You want to activate and incite certain emotions so that people take action. So it's not all. We also test other values, but values or metrics are an important part of our charity brand evaluator. And lastly, not least, we run driver analysis. I'll explain more later, but driver analysis helps us see beyond these metrics and seeing what actually drives support for your brand. So one example of like how CBE could help you is that, here we have one of the common challenges amongst our clients, which is differentiation, which was one of the values we test. So say you're running a new appeal for vulnerable children stuck at home because of the pandemic. This is not like criticism or like negative example, but I grabbed these visuals from several children's charities. And this really kind of shows the difficulty of charity brands because you work in the same area, helping the same group of people, and you may end up having a very similar visual, running very similar activity, and end up having very similar brand perception. So maybe some people say, like, this is good news that you're just delivering like a uniform, united voice, but for some people, differentiation is a challenge. So what does our data say about this? And it shows differentiation is difficult. This is another sector, animals and animal welfare. And here I have an example of 5 different animal charities. So these 5 lines represent 5 different existing animal charities, and they all, I think, about the same income size, obviously slight differentiation, but about 10 mil. And they all offer rescuing, treating, and rehoming animals. Some campaign against animal cruelty. Some help just one type of animals, but they are all pet charities. And so you see some differences in general, like the koala charities somehow considered less practical than others, but the overall shape of brand perception, the attributes, is very, very similar. Maybe like some differences, but overall it is really difficult to differentiate because all these 5 charities are considered or described in a very similar set of attributes. But you also may wonder, well, isn't it the same for all sectors? Children and animals, it's very, very difficult to have very different brand personalities. Well, just to give an example where it could be different, you can have 2 different personalities, is looking at 2 environmental conservation charities. So here you have the purple and green, teal, blue line, and they're both environment charities. And they're described like in a very, again, similar set of attributes, but one, this pink charity is considered more campaigning and more determined, and the blue one is slightly more trustworthy and practical. So it's possible that they have 2 different run 2 different activities. Also possible they're reaching different types of people, 2 different types of audiences, but also shows that I think especially in environment sector, we see the shape of the brand is very different for in each organization. So you don't see like the one we saw in animals or children. But going back to animals, charity, animals sector, for those having a very similar brand in a fairly competitive sector, what can they do? So we have dogs charity coming to us, and this is the icon is random dogs. This is not dog stress, just so you know. But you know, here we are, dogs charity coming to us. We are an animal charity. There are about 5 of us, and how are we perceived? And we did the research, and the research shows actually you're considered caring, supportive, and friendly, practical, trustworthy, and so on. And you have a very nice, warm attributes. And dog charity said, well, actually, you know, this is nice, but you know, our comparator is this raccoon charity. They're about the same income size. Their rescue center is close to us. What are they like? So they are also considered caring. That's their top attribute, but established, trustworthy. So they're slightly different, even though they are similar. Well, I think one thing that we should note is raccoon is considered more caring than the dog charity. So seeing this, dog charity was a bit worried about the brand attributes benchmarking. So what we did was driver analysis. How does this work? So in CBE, I will try to explain the methodology. It's quite complex, but bear with me. So in CBE, we asked not just about brand attributes, but also other questions, such as if charities are considered relevant, visible, or to be making an impact. In addition to a simple question like how much do you like this brand, rate on the scale of 0 to 10. So driver analysis allows us to explore the relationship between these questions and see how strong one of them is compared to others in predicting brand preference. So this model shows, for example, relevance being considered, being seen as relevant, can predict about 30% of variation in the responses that preferred the dog charity brand. So this is how you read it. You see that relevance is far stronger in terms of driving support than being seen as here caring or supportive. These are still important drivers of support. And if you remember, caring was dog charity's top attribute. They're important, but being seen as relevant or being seen as an impactful organization seem to be more important at driving brand preference. So let's look then at dog charity's relevance score. So the way we calculate is we prompt these statements. Charity X is an organization that meets a genuine need. Charity X is more relevant today than ever. And Charity X is relevant to me as an organization. And we ask respondents if they agree or disagree. So dog charity had the majority of its respondents, maybe 60%, 60-70% agree that they're relevant to the respondents. That's great, but what does it really mean in the context of competing brands? It's not really helpful when we tell you your relevance score is 60%. It doesn't really mean anything because you need to see the benchmark. And this is what exactly CBE does for you. So we asked the same about 20-ish other charities. So it's not just animal charities. You see all the different brands like ranging in different sectors, from health, medical, to armed forces, to environment, and homelessness and social welfare. And dog's benchmark is right here, and we have also other animal charities, raccoons here, koala, and monkey. So they're kind of stuck together. It's very kind of bunched up, not terribly different. So what we can say is like, okay, your relevance score is kind of like around this level, on the same level as animal charities, and maybe it is difficult for people to find one animal charity a lot more relevant than the other. And obviously, we can break these results by different demographics, such as pet ownership. And when we break that by pet ownership, the relevance score goes up for most animal charities. Not surprising, but it didn't really look like one animal charity was doing particularly better than the others. Relevance is also an interesting metric. We've been talking a lot about animal charities here, but for example, like without naming names, those who were at the top, cancer charities also do well, but specialist cancer brands, like those cancer charities specialized in one type of cancer, did particularly well in being seen as relevant to people who are aware of them. So in this way, we get to see each and every value and attribute on the benchmark in comparison to other charities. So if you remember, so relevance was the top driver for dog charity, and the second top driver of support was impact. So let's look at impact. So we prompted these statements. The world would be a worse place without charity X. Charity X makes a real difference in the world, and charity X spends its money wisely. Again, we asked these statements about dog charity, and about half of them, 50 to 60%, agreed. But again, it doesn't really mean anything unless we compare it to others and benchmark. So dog is here, and they're seen to make slightly less impact than their comparators, raccoon and koala. Raccoon is doing very well, ranking at the third of all, the list of all brands in all sectors. And this could be the way they communicate to their supporters, what the difference they make. And it's also interesting where in the relevance benchmark, animal charities were kind of all stuck together, but in impact in the impact benchmark, you see some differentiation in the scores. In terms of impact, obviously you may say like, well, being seen as relevant or being seen as making impact is obviously very important. It's not that like terribly different, but like some sectors do well, some brands do well. I think in this wave of research, the top 3 of the top 5 brands, I think, were disability and sensory impairment charities. And I think it's also because they provide like practical equipment for people with disability, and that really was seen as making practical, like big impact. So we tested dogs charities brand attributes and did driver analysis using these metrics. So our advice to dog was being seen as relevant and making an impact is an important driver of support for your brand. Your relevance score is on a similar level to your comparators, but you are considered to make maybe slightly less impact. So you can connect to your supporters by communicating what a difference your work makes by helping animals, and also learn from others who perform better at impact. So that was a very, very short overview of what Charity Brand Evaluator CBE can do for you. And I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you have any questions about the research, please don't hesitate to get in touch at the email here, cbe@nfpsynergy.net, or any overall questions about research or on nfpSynergy at insights@nfpsynergy.net. Well, thanks very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.